All right, we'll call the meeting of the Planning Commission to order. Couple notes before we get started here. The following agenda items are withdrawn. Item number 1, the proposed Rose Edition zone change located at 619 University Drive. And the item number 2 is being continued to the November 2nd, 2021 Planning Commission agenda. So item number 2 is the proposed Dakota Air Parts Edition subdivision located at 3910 and 4020 25th Street North and 2505 39.5 Street North. So there's no presentation on these items today and there's no action will be taken by the commission. But if there is anybody here that would like to testify on these, I'd be happy to take those today if you can't, since you made it out. Is there anybody here that would like to speak on item 1 or 2 on the agenda? Seeing no one, a couple other updates. There's no brown bag meeting this month. So on Wednesday, September 22nd, there will be no brown bag. And then we are proposing to add an agenda item at the end of the agenda today. It's not a public hearing item, but planning staff has an announcement regarding the land development code diagnostic. And so I, as part of the motion to approve the order of agenda, I'd ask that we add that item at the end of the agenda today. Commission, I'd look for and approve the order of agenda with the addition of that.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Item number B, the minutes for our meeting of August 3rd. Everybody have a chance to review those. I'd take a motion for approval.
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? Any changes? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, same sign. The motion passes. Moving on to the public hearing items. Again, items 1 and 2 will not be heard today. So moving to item 3, continued hearing on an application requesting a conditional use permit to allow residential living in the general commercial zoning district on Lot 4, Block 1 of Valley View 8th Edition. And Kylie is going to present to us today. Thanks.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Item 3 is titled Valley View 8th Edition. The applicant, Brian Konofsky, is seeking approval of a conditional use permit to allow residential living in the GC General Commercial Zoning District on Lot 4, Block 1, Valley View 8th Edition. The subject property is located at 5652 36th Avenue South. The applicant is proposing a mixed-use building with 8,297 square feet of office and 68 residential units. In order to accommodate his proposed mixed-use building, the applicant is requesting a density of 35 units per acre. The subject property is just shy of 2 acres. Staff has not received any inquiries on this project, and based on the conditional use criteria of the LDC, staff is recommending approval with the following condition as shown on the PowerPoint. If you have any questions at this time, I'd be happy to answer them. And also the applicant is here with us today for any questions as well.
Thank you, Kylie. I guess I just had one clarification. So the next item on the agenda is on the same location. Do you just want to make reference to that and why we have 2 different items, just so we know they don't conflict with each other?
Correct. So this application is solely for the lot at 5652 36th Avenue South, and it is a CUP for residential living in the GC General Commercial. The next application you'll see is for 5 lots within the Valley View Edition, as shown on your screen. And then that is for a parking agreement across all those sites. So this residential living will only be on this subject property, not on all of the 5 lots, as you'll see in the next presentation.
Thanks for that clarification. Any other questions for Kylie?
I have a question. With it being a conditional use permit, doesn't that permit usually expire if some change takes place within on the site?
It can if we put that as a condition.
Well, that's what I thought the condition part of the use permit, the word referring to that is about. So just to clarify that if you could.
Yeah, so this wouldn't wouldn't terminate unless another conditional use permit came in and terminated this. The conditions that are on this, so it's a special permit that can be allowed in the zoning district, and that has conditions attached to it. And so this condition would be that the maximum residential density shall be 35 units per acre.
I see. And so does that conditional use permit or the terminology cease at any time and turn into some other kind of definition?
No.
I think maybe one clarification, Commissioner, is that, sometimes when they're asking for an exception from the city, they do a CUP, and we want to make sure that that exception doesn't go on forever if the use changes. In other cases, you do a COP because it's something that fits better in that area. So for this, where it's adjacent to a residential neighborhood, having that buffer of residential and mixed use is preferable. I'd see it from the city standpoint. And so it's not something we want to lose if the use changes. So
Yeah,
it's
that
more our
makes sense
wish,
to me.
probably.
Yeah, thanks.
I have a question, Kylie. So how do you deal with the parking then? So the parking in the next application, so if this gets approved but the parking doesn't get approved, what happens to this? Is this automatically approved then as is? Without
Yes,
the
'cause they're-
parking?
Yes, so they're two separate applications. The next item is for a shared parking agreement, so if that didn't get approved, then this development would have to meet all their parking on site, so on that 56, 52, 36.
But they wouldn't get, they'd have to do full. They couldn't do reduced parking.
So they already have a reduced parking CUP that was approved in 2018. So what we're gonna see next is just for a shared parking
So
agreement.
that, but this would revolve, if that didn't happen, the 2018 would still stand. then
Correct,
That approved
yes.
would still stand. Okay, so they've already got it, in 2018, they got a reduction to do this plan. And so if the parking wasn't done, they would still be able to use it at that level.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
They would just have to make sure all that parking at that, reduction is met on site.
Okay.
So one other question, Kylie, along that same line of parking. The number of units that are approved per acre have nothing to do with the mixed-use part of the building.
Correct.
So the parking, when you look at it, when you guys look at the parking issue, are we looking at the parking for the 35 units per acre, or are we looking for that combined with the mixed use?
So we'll look at both the uses. So we'll look at the office use and the residential use for parking.
Okay,
So they would have to meet those requirements.
okay.
Any other questions? What's the will of the commission? Oh, not yet. We're way, jumped the gun on that one. We'll invite the applicant to speak if they so wish. Is there any questions for the applicant? Seeing none, is there anybody in the audience that would wish to speak on this item? If there's no one in the audience that'd like to speak, I'll close the public hearing and we'll go back to the commission.
I'll move staff recommendation.
There's a motion.
Second.
Motion and a second for approval. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll take a vote.
Morgan,
Aye.
Rosenberg,
Aye.
Holtz,
Aye.
Gunkelman,
Aye.
Tassa,
Aye.
Schneider.
Aye. The motion passes. Moving on, Kylie.
Item number 4 is titled Valley View 8th Edition. The applicant, Brian Kanofsky, is requesting a conditional use permit to allow an alternative access plan for a shared parking agreement on lots 1 through 5, Block 1, Valley View 8th Edition. The subject property is located at 3610, 3630, 3650, and 3680 Veterans Boulevard, as well as 5652 36th Avenue South. The subject property received a conditional use permit for a parking reduction in 2018. At that time, the property was one lot. Since that approval, the property has been subdivided, which the planning department would require parking be met on each individual lot at the time of a building permit review. The shared parking agreement will allow the parking to be met on the overall development. So as you can see on your screen, this is the master plan for that site that the developer has provided to us. The applicant has also provided the city with a recorded shared parking agreement on the subject property as required in the Land Development Code. Staff has not received any inquiries on the subject property. Based on the conditional use criteria of LDC, staff is recommending approval. If you have any questions at this time, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions for staff?
I do. Kylie, is this for lots 1 through 5 then?
Yes.
How come the declaration of easement only says lots 2 and 5?
On their shared parking agreement?
Yeah.
That was recorded? Because at that time, the subject property was not subdivided, so it's Lot 2, Block 5 of Valley View 4th Edition.
Right, so it's
So
gonna
now
be-
we're Valley View 8th Edition.
Oh, okay. So it's gonna be 1 through 5, this is different then?
So it'll be the same subject property.
Okay,
It's just now been subdivided.
okay. So the existing 2 properties that are there, Dakota Lending and the Tupperware store, are they part of the shared easement agreement or not?
So the Tupperware studio is, the lending building is not.
Okay.
Any other questions for Kylie? Seeing none, and the applicant, would you like to add anything additional? Are there any questions for the applicant?
I'd like to ask one question.
Sure, could we just wait one moment? We'll let the applicant get up and introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Brian Konofsky with K-Square Developers.
Thanks, go ahead, Don.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask a question about the Tupperware site. What sort of activity is that? Because I remember there used to be a Tupperware site on the north side, and it turned into an event center in addition to what it had been also the Tupperware Center. Does this have anything to do with that?
No, this Tupperware site is one of 8 sites in the country where they do training.
For Tupperware salespeople?
Correct.
Okay, so then what sort of parking does that require when they have, how many people do they have coming in?
I'm not involved with that business, so I don't know. The amount of parking that they have right now is sufficient, so it's just whatever's right around their building.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? If none, thank you. Anybody in the audience wish to speak on this item? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. And commission, what are your wishes, or any further discussion?
I'll move to accept the recommendation of staff.
Motion for approval, is there a second?
Second,
Motion and a second, any discussion? We'll take a roll call.
Tassa.
Aye.
Foltz.
Aye.
Rosenberg.
Aye.
Morgan.
aye.
Gunkelman.
Aye.
Schneider.
Aye. Moving on to, passes, moving on to agenda number 5. We'll invite Donald up to give us a presentation of a hearing on an application requesting a zoning change from agricultural to multi-dwelling residential with a PUD overlay on the proposed Maplewood Estates addition.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Donald Kress with the Department of Planning and Development. As the chairman has stated, this is the Maplewood Estates Second Edition, a zone change, major subdivision, planned unit development, and master land use plan. I will start by noting that as the staff has continued to work with the applicant, we have changed our recommendation for today. Originally in your staff report, it stated the recommendation was for approval. We're going to talk about this project now, but our final recommendation for today will be a continuation to the October 5th Planning Commission, and you'll see why we're going to do that as we go forward here. The property is located at 5601, 5605 38th Street So just off this picture to the north would be the 52nd Avenue Walmart. This property down here will be the new Sanford Sports Complex. This was all recently annexed here this year, I-29 here. And it's a long, narrow property. This is all under one ownership now. I believe, Mr. Eunice, you bought out this one dwelling here. The dwelling is still there at this time, but this is entirely owned by Eagle Ridge Development at this time. This is what the site looks like from the east side and the west side here. This property here, this is the frontage road that runs along I-29. Access to this frontage road will be terminated with this plat, so you'll only be able to access it off 38th Street south, and that limits the size of the development on this in terms of the number of residential units that can be developed pursuant to fire code. The plat for this project just combines the existing auditor's lot and unplatted area here into a single lot, and again terminates access to the frontage road here. As for the zoning, the property is currently zoned agricultural, and the proposed zoning is MR3, multi-dwelling residential, with a planned unit development, PUD, largely to increase the density on this. This is a plan here. You've got an updated version. This is the plat that's in front of you today here. This is just a slightly updated one from the one that's in your packet. But this is the general proposed layout here of 200-unit multi-dwelling buildings that largely face the park down here, or at least have a lot of facing on the park here. There again is no access from the east side. All the access is from the west. So the planned unit development to accommodate this doesn't make too many changes here. It does increase the density. As you know, in the MR3 zone, the maximum density would be 24 dwelling units per acre. Here it's increased to 35 dwelling units per acre. For the setbacks, no change in dimensions is requested. Say small change in the building lot coverage, a little bit of change in the open space, and then some modification of the landscaping requirements here, not in terms of total amount of landscaping, but in terms of placement due to the long, narrow lot. It's a challenging lot to develop. The one area we're still working with the applicant on is the parking. It was noted in your staff report that the engineering staff was still reviewing the parking, and the applicant, just to clarify everything, has contracted to have a traffic study done to support his proposed requested change to the parking, which is that's something that his contractor will do, and our traffic engineer will review. And so until we get that final number, we would request that your commission continue this to October 5th, by which time we should have that report, I believe, Mr. Eunice probably, and staff will have time to review it, and then we could finalize the PUD here. So our recommendation is to continue the Maplewood Estates Second Edition at project to October 5th, 2021 Planning Commission. The applicant, John Eunice of Eagle Ridge Development, is with us this afternoon. If you have any questions for him, and if you have any questions for staff. Thank you. Commissioners, that concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you, Donald. Any questions from the commission?
Quick
Go ahead, John.
question. So this is all a private drive, the whole length of it?
Yes, so that this here is not a public street. The public street is 38th.
Right. And when we've had these before, and it's maybe a question for Ryan, they have to install, I thought we've had issues before. I don't remember if it was an IDCO development or whatever, with the length from the street to the last unit. So I take it incorporated with this, Ryan, would be multiple fire hydrants and all that good stuff?
Yeah, we would go through this with our normal site plan review process, and we've been talking to the applicant about that. There is a limit of how many units you can put in on development with one access point. But yeah, they would design in turnarounds and hydrants and then the appropriate access within that.
Okay, I mean, I thought we'd had something similar before. I know it was strictly residential and not apartments, but.
We have spoke out on private drives where they've had multiple lots and different owners.
Yeah.
Because that creates a problem in how to handle the parking, and then when there's parking violations, because of the complexity with multiple ownership in there and that type of stuff. In this case, what would happen is the apartment owner or complex manager would be required to enforce their parking and to make sure that those roads are clear and accessible.
Thank you.
Thanks, Miranda.
Donald, on the growth plan, is that a resident, I see the orange, I don't know what the orange key indicator is, it's mostly residential area?
Let me go to that map here. Yes, so this is, yeah, those colors on the legend don't differentiate very well, there you are, correct. But, so this property is in both the high to medium to high density residential and the commercial
Okay.
zone. When we get them, they're in both sections like that. We generally don't make the applicant do a growth plan as long as it seems consistent with what's going on around him. So though this is currently not developed, your commission may recall recently recommending approval for the District of Fargo 4th Edition, which includes both commercial and residential here. This is residential, this is Maplewood Estates 1st Edition, also owned by the applicant. So there is considerable residential for it to tie in around here, and it is probably not practical to develop this as commercial because of the limited access. There is no access off the frontage road. It's an oddly configured project. So a high-density residential seemed an appropriate development for this to staff.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to ask a question.
Yes,
Donald, now this is, indicates that this is north, right, of 64th or 62nd?
Yes, ma'am.
Avenue?
Yes, ma'am. So 64th Avenue would be, keep going down here. It's off the page here, but yeah, so 50, I should have backed this map out a little bit, but 52nd Avenue is up here and 64th is down here.
Okay, so how far is this from the proposed sports arena?
It's right, the pro storage unit is right in here.
Okay,
This is that Sanford property, ma'am, so it goes
it
down.
is,
Yep.
okay.
That's correct.
So is that going to impact the housing development at all? It's going to be a huge project, of course, not only in its development, but in its conclusion.
Well, is our understanding, and we do not have a park representative here with us today, that there's a physical facility, and then there are also a number of sports fields, which I believe is going to be in this area here. So it is my understanding that the big building is not going to be right there. As for other questions about the impact, perhaps the developer would have some perspective on that. Mr. Eunice?
Yeah, I'd be interested because I think
Donald?
there's also going to be kind of parkland and walking trails and that sort of thing on the property.
Yeah, and I don't know that they have the final down for that, ma'am, but it is my understanding that, again, adjacent to this are sports fields down here.
Sure, we'll invite the applicant up. If you want to introduce yourself, John.
Yeah, Commissioners, John Eunice, Eagle Ridge Development. Yeah, talking about the park project that's planned right now to the south, their intent right now is to have soccer fields and trails, and we felt like this type of project is fits real nicely with being able to overlook a park.
Good. So then, in terms of noise and parking, you don't foresee that as being any problem?
No, right now there's no intent to have parking fields from the park district up along the north side of the property. That'll all be further south. They're planning soccer fields immediately adjacent to our property.
Yeah, and I also think that there's a trail that goes south.
Yep, there's a trail that runs along 38th, and I think you can almost see the underpass where there's that trail continues to a pond trail system that the engineering department has planned.
Okay, so what is, the lake that's being developed, where is that in relation to this project?
That is way off to the west here.
About a
Oh,
mile
it
to
is.
the west.
Okay, over by 29.
No, this is I-29 here, ma'am. So it's way off on the other, my cursor doesn't go that far, way off to the west, so it's.
40,
It's past 45th, it's on the other side of 45th.
okay.
Yes.
How far will that be from this project?
So a little over a mile.
About a mile, John?
Oh, okay. Sounds like exciting times.
Yeah.
Any other questions for the applicant?
My only question would be, so the access to this apartment building is gonna be private for residents only? There's not gonna be public access, or it'll be marked that it's,
Well, it'll be similar. I mean, all the infrastructure and roads inside our property will be private. The residents and any visitors would use that for access. But because of the termination of the frontage road, we only have the one access to 38th Street, which is the city right of way.
okay. I guess I'm just thinking in terms of if there's a soccer event and people start trying to park along the side of the road, if that's gonna impact.
We'll have.
In case of an emergency, if, for residents needing to exit that area.
Yeah, I don't believe there's any on-street parking on 38th Street, which is an arterial road. And we'll have plenty of signage to make sure that they know that that's not the park property for access. Again, they're, right now, and I can't speak directly for the park, but everything they've told us is that their parking fields will be further to the south and that their soccer fields will be backing up to us.
Thank you. Any follow-ups or other questions?
Commissioners, just prior to
ahead,
the
Don.
next hearing, if your commission recommends going forward, we can check out the park layout and see if they have a layout that helps you clarify your understanding of that.
Thank you. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
As part of the public hearing, anybody in the audience interested in speaking on this item? Anybody want to speak on this item? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Commission, what's your wishes?
It's continued.
Oh, this one's continued.
I
Or we
moved.
need to continue it.
Oh, right. I'll make that motion.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second to continue this item to October 5th meeting. Is there any discussion? If not, we'll take the roll.
Morgan,
Aye.
Tossa,
Aye.
Gunkelman,
Aye.
Holtz,
Aye.
Rosenberg,
Aye.
Schneider.
Aye. The motion will be continued, or the item will be continued. Moving on to number 6 on the agenda, a hearing on the application requesting a plat of Timber Parkway 6th Edition, a replat of Lot 3, Block 1 of Timber Parkway 3rd Edition to the city of Fargo. And we have Aaron. Go ahead, Aaron.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So Timber Parkway 6th Edition, this is a request for a minor subdivision. Subject property is located at 5081 Charles Way South. This is just east of I-29 and just north of 52nd Avenue. The applicant, Chris Mack, is here representing the ownership. Should you have any questions for the applicant? And the property is located within the GC General Commercial Zoning District. There is no requested change for zoning. Really, the intent of this application is just to subdivide one existing lot into 2 new lots for future commercial development. So pretty straightforward. Staff finds the proposed subdivision complies with all applicable standards and review criteria of the Land Development Code, and we are recommending approval. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Aaron. Any questions? Seeing none, is the applicant here and wish to speak at all? Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Seeing none, anybody in the audience would like to speak on this item? Seeing nobody in the audience that would like to speak, Commission, what's your wishes?
I'd like to make a motion to accept the findings and recommendation of staff on Timber Parkway 6th Edition.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second for approval. Any discussion? Take the roll.
Rosenberg,
Aye.
Gunkelman,
Aye.
Holtz,
Aye.
Morgan,
Aye.
Tossa,
Aye.
Schneider.
Aye, and motion passes. Moving on to item number 7, a hearing on an application requesting a conditional use permit to allow an alternative access plan for the parking reduction on Lot 1, Block 1, Ulteig Edition. And Kylie's back up.
Item number 7 is titled Ulteig Edition. The applicant, Mark Weston, is requesting a conditional use permit for an alternative access plan for a parking reduction on Lot 1, Block 1 of Ulteig Edition. The subject property is located at 3550 and 3540 38th Avenue South. The applicant is proposing to have 17,411 square feet of office space in a religious institution, which will hold 140 seats on the subject property. The Land Development Code requires 0.4 parking stalls per seat within a religious institution and 1 parking stall per 300 square feet for an office. This would be for a total of 114 parking stalls on site. The applicant is requesting to reduce the required parking from 114 parking stalls to 74 parking stalls, stating that the religious institution and offices will not operate at the same time. And just for reference, they will be constructing 2 office buildings, and the religious institution will be within one of those office buildings on site. Staff has not received any inquiries regarding this application. Based on the conditional use permit criteria of the Land Development Code, staff is recommending approval with the following conditions. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this time.
Thank you, Kylie. Any questions for staff?
Kylie, where is this going? I'm confused. Now, it's not south of Fleet Farm. Where, isn't that the building, isn't there a building there? Is it between the apartment and the building on the street?
Correct. So there's one office building, and then they're building another office building right here, and then there's the apartment building.
So is they're gonna be shared, is it a shared parking lot between the two buildings then?
Correct. So I believe this building currently just has offices in it, and then the proposed building will have office space and a religious institution within it. This has been something that we have been seeing all over town happen with smaller churches operating inside office buildings until they get enough following to have their own church or religious institution.
So when you talk about parking, you're talking about for both buildings? It
Correct.
needs
Yes,
that much
correct.
parking?
So the parking's already built on site. It was built as part of this permit, and now they're just coming in for a parking, for a permit for the second building, and then that kicked in this parking reduction.
Okay, so it's not a separate, it's a separate building, but it's on the same property?
Correct,
Under the
yes.
same parking lot? Okay, now it makes sense.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So the mention of the religious institution or group, the number of people or what they're accommodating is of course a very small number. And you had said that the intention of most of these types of startups is with the idea of moving once they can build their own building. Two questions. Part of it is, one, is the office that the religious group will be in, is that their office, or is it a different kind of office space, or it could be leased to anyone?
I believe that'd be a good question for the applicant.
Okay, and then secondly, if the church, with its intentions to move, will the parking be reviewed at the time that something else moves in there?
Correct. So on this conditional permit, use permit, we did put a cease order that if the religious institution changes for more than 12 consecutive months, that this conditional use permit would cease to exist. So after 12 months, if the religious institution moves out, and then, a year and 3 days later, another religious institution comes back in, then they would have to come back in front of your commission to re-review their parking.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, I'll ask the applicant to come up if you're here. Thank you. Introduce yourself, please, when you get up to the podium.
Good afternoon. I'm Mark Weston, one of the owners of I-29 Investments.
Thanks for being here. Don, did you have a question for the applicant?
Let's see, what was it?
I think it was the use of the space. I mean,
Oh,
currently.
yeah. The
yeah.
use, with the building that's going to have the that'll have the religious group in it.
Yep.
Is the office space in there associated with the religious group, or is it,
No, we don't have tenants for the rest of the space. It's new space. It's about 11,600 square foot building. We got approved to build that, but then as the construction was beginning, we were contacted by a church that was looking for a small space, and that's when we contacted the city to, see if we could put them in there. And we've had to do a few other things. We have to sprinkle the building. There's several other things we have to do now if we bring a church into that building.
oh, I see.
Yep.
And so was there one parking spot in the other office for the 300 square foot? I think it was mentioned that one parking spot was required for the office.
Yeah, and that, we've tried to meet all the codes. I guess my builders and architects and engineers could answer that. I just know that we've tried to meet anything the city's requested, so I would assume that the appropriate spaces are there.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep, you bet.
Thank you. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak on this item? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Back to the commission. What are your wishes?
I move to approve.
There's a motion for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll take a roll.
Tassa.
Aye.
Holtz.
Aye.
Rosenberg.
Aye.
Gunkelman.
Aye.
Morgan.
Aye.
Schneider.
Aye, and the motion passes. Moving on to number 8 on the agenda, a hearing on the application requesting a zoning change from limited commercial to limited commercial with a conditional overlay on the proposed Maple Valley 5th edition. And there is an A and a B and a C on this. So Donald, why don't you let us know what they are?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, as the chairman stated, Maple Valley 5th Edition is a zone change, a minor subdivision, and a conditional use permit. One note, as is noted in your staff report, on that conditional use permit, originally it was advertised as being one for household living and parking reduction, but we don't actually, the parking reduction is not necessary. So here's one CUP that does not have a parking reduction today. So it is just for the residential living in the limited commercial zone. The subject property is located at 6050 36th Street South. This is I-29 here. 64th Avenue is down here. This is the future overpass. The Maplewood Estates property is just right up here, just for reference. And this California-shaped property, sorry, up here. This is existing residential with some small areas of commercial. There is no actual commercial activity in this at that time. There are a total of 28 apartment units here. The rest of this property is undeveloped. The entire property is zoned LC Limited Commercial. The conditional use permit, so an LC Limited Commercial. The property looks like this. Here's the existing apartment buildings, and then the open space. These residences are adjacent to the east. And then here's a picture from the other end of the street, again showing the apartment buildings and the commercial space in between. The plat proposes to divide this property into two, one that will just be the apartment buildings, and then one that will be proposed to be developed with condominium ownership of storage areas, and the applicant can go into that in a little more detail on this one. But we need the conditional use permit for residential living in the LC zone to continue a conditional use permit that's existing. So again, going back to one of Commissioner Morgan's points, that this was originally issued as a conditional use permit for residences both here and across the street. Since we're replatting this, we just need to update the CUP to be able to continue it. So there's no actual change in density, no additional units. It's just the CUP to keep that in place. And then so that only applies to lot 1. That's the only residential portion of this project. For lot 2, this is the lot will have the conditional overlay, which is you're very familiar with. We often do this on limited commercial properties. It just mitigates potential effects of this, especially since there's residential to the north and single family to the east here. Puts in a few design standards, puts some limitations on uses. We've worked with this with the applicant, and he's reviewed that, and again, is very familiar with working with those. And the applicant, Nate Volmuth, is with us here this afternoon, may wish to address the commission. The recommended motion here is stated in the staff report and shown on your screen. The conditional use permit, of course, stops with your commission, and the plat and the zone change go on to the city commission. That concludes staff's presentation. Thank you, commissioners.
Thanks, Donald. Any questions for Donald? Seeing none, we'll invite the applicant to talk about his California-shaped property.
Thank you. I'm Nate Volmuth, representing the owner and the developer. I don't have any additional things to add. Donald did a great job. If you have any questions, feel free. Thank you.
Any questions for the applicant?
I have a question. So is this just self-storage?
It's going to be storage. It's going to be a similar concept that the developer has done in another part of town over on 51st Avenue. There'll be, right now the plan is to have 3 to 5 buildings with condoed bays, essentially for man caves or for small contractors that would like to have a bathroom and office and a place to park their pickup or trailers inside.
Yeah. But they're not residential. They're just the standard man caves everybody's building around town.
Yes, there's no living within them.
Commissioner Rosenberg, that's actually in the conditional overlay, is that residential is prohibited on this.
Just to ask the question, because I've been seeing it in other places outside of Fargo. What are the ones that are called that are storage, can have a shop, but also can be residential?
Yeah, I understand there are a great variety of these, ma'am. Again, as we stated, these are not allowed to be residential, and even any sort of shop use would be very limited, if at all, by the LC zone. So,
Okay, thank you.
but that's included in the conditional overlay and in these standard requirements of the LC zone.
Seeing no other questions for the applicant, thank you. Anybody in the audience wish to speak on this item? Is anybody here that wants to speak on this item? If not, we'll close the public hearing. Commissioners?
I'll move to accept the findings and recommendation of staff.
Thank you. We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Either one. Take it.
We have a motion and a second. I'll take a roll, please.
Tassa.
Aye.
Rosenberg.
Aye.
Morgan.
Aye.
Holtz.
Aye.
Dunkelman.
Aye.
Schneider.
Aye. The motion passes. Thank you, Donald. Moving on to item number 9. A hearing on an application requesting a zoning change from limited commercial to general commercial and limited commercial to general commercial on the proposed Interstate Park Second Edition. Hopefully Adam can explain that because I just felt like I read the same thing twice. So.
Yes, good afternoon, Commissioners. Item 9 on the agenda is titled Interstate Park Second Edition. It is located at 3502 and 3518 Interstate Boulevard South. As you can see, this is located near the interchange of I-29 and 13th Avenue South. The applicant, Kevin Hall, is requesting a minor subdivision and a zone change from GC General Commercial and LC Limited Commercial to GC General Commercial and LC Limited Commercial for the property described as portions of lots 6, 7, and 9 and all of Lot 8, Block 4, Interstate Park Edition. Additionally, the applicant is requesting a conditional use permit to allow household living in the GC General Commercial Zoning District on Lot 1, Block 1 of the proposed Interstate Park Second Edition. And here's a zoning map showing. So the pink is the limited commercial and red is the general commercial on the site. And as you can see on the aerial too, the property line currently goes through the Super 8, which puts the Super 8 hotel in 2 different properties and 2 different zoning districts. Here are some images of the site. The site is currently occupied by the Super 8 hotel to the west and a multi-dwelling structure to the east. The arrow pointing to the image on the right shows approximately where the current property line runs through the building. The proposed plat will create a 2-lot subdivision in which Lot 1 will retain the current multi-dwelling residential structure and Lot 2 will retain the existing Super 8 hotel. In addition to the replat, the subject property will need to be rezoned, as I had mentioned. So here's what it's currently zoned as with the footprint of the Super 8. As I mentioned, the Super 8 hotel currently sits on 2 different properties and in 2 different zoning districts. To bring the Super 8 hotel completely into one zoning district, the applicant is proposing to rezone the subject property to align the existing districts within the proposed lots in Interstate Park Second Edition. And here's the proposed layout. Lastly, the applicant is seeking a conditional use permit to allow household living in the GC General Commercial Zoning District for the proposed Lot 1, Block 1 Interstate Park Second Edition at a maximum density of 28 units per acre. This residential development was originally allowed under a CUP approved by the Planning Commission in July 2019 with a maximum residential density of 18 units per acre. As this property is being replatted, the CUP must be updated to be specific to this plat. Since the eastern lot will shrink to 0.9 acres as a result of the proposed plat, the density will increase. The existing building will remain at 25 dwelling units. As a result, the proposed density on Lot 1 will increase to 28 units per acre. Upon reviewing the case, the staff found all review criteria to be satisfied. A written notice of the proposal was sent to all property owners within 300 feet of the subject property. To date, staff has received no comments or inquiries. The applicant, Kevin Hall, is with us this afternoon and may wish to address the commission. Staff is recommending approval, and the suggested motion can be found in the staff report and on the screen. That concludes staff's presentation, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. Any questions for staff?
One question again. That's why this seemed familiar. You're saying in 2018, explain to me again what we did in 2018. We
Correct.
approved, we approved the same thing, but on a bigger piece of property?
Yes, so it was in July 2019 is when this case was presented to your commission. And so this is what the lots currently look like right now. And this is what the previous CUP was approved for, the red property here. So then with the density of that previous CUP, it was calculated off the square footage of that lot, which calculated to be about 18 units per acre. And since the lot is getting smaller, then the density would be increasing. The number of units is not changing. I hope that answers your question.
The density would be increasing. Okay, so we're approving a denser, okay.
Correct. Yep.
It just out of general interest, the Super 8, how have they been interacting with this process? And what kind of density do they predict for their motel?
That would be a great question for the applicant.
Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, we'll ask the applicant to approach the podium and please introduce yourself.
Hello, Chairman. My name is Kevin Hall. I'm the owner of all these properties.
Thank you for joining us today. Commissioner Morgan, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, since the density is being increased surrounding the Super 8, what is the prediction in terms of density for the Super 8 itself? I know that some hotels, motels are extremely, are booked up and is that what they're anticipating? That there's going to be a lot of traffic coming in and the density will be high with the motel as well as the increasing density of the neighborhood?
Well, so the actual density of both facilities, it's 25 on the multifamily, and it was 84 for the hotel. It's actually operating today with 78 rooms. So the actual number of units has condensed, and the land mass is not changing. It's just really a reallocation of where we put the property line. There's separate accesses. We have ample parking for the 25 unit apartment. I think it requires 57. And on the Super 8 side, there's ample parking for those spots also. So it doesn't increase the density of the Super 8. It's actually, in today's times, there's been less usage of the hotels for the past couple of years with conditions as is, and there's an oversupply of hotel rooms in the community.
That's not expected to continue though into the future for any great
Let's
length.
try to keep the discussion related to the agenda item. Any other questions for the applicant while they're up? Seeing none, thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Is there anybody out in the audience that wishes to speak to this item? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Back to the commission. Is there any discussion on this item?
So maybe I just misunderstood, and I'm sorry that you sat down. I probably should ask this sooner, but I thought I was understanding that the hotel was going to be converted to residential, and then so they're attached.
I think, yeah, Adam, if you want to clarify again, I think the line is just shifting on the lot.
Sure.
The buildings are not changing. And
Correct.
So clarify if I'm wrong, and so we're shifting the amount of units per acre just because the line's shifting. It doesn't mean the number of units on either property is projected to change at this time.
Sure.
Correct, yeah. So the existing residential building on the east side of the property, in the proposed Lot 1, Block 1, the conversion from an extended stay hotel to multifamily residential came before your commission was approved in 2019. So the uses of both buildings are not changing, merely they're just moving the property line out of the hotel and further to the east, so that way both buildings are brought into more conformity.
Thank you, Adam, for the clarification. Is there any other questions on this? Discussions?
I'll make the motion to accept the findings of staff.
Thank you. There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second for approval. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, will you read the roll?
Morgan,
Aye.
Holtz,
Aye.
Gunkelman,
Aye.
Tasa,
Aye.
Rosenberg,
Aye.
Schneider.
Aye. Motion passes. Moving on to number 10, a hearing on the application requesting a plat of Prairie Farms Commercial Third Edition, a replat of Lot 2, Block 1, Prairie Farms Commercial Second Edition to the city of Fargo. And Adam, you're up again.
Thank you. Item 10 on the agenda is titled Prairie Farms Commercial Third Edition and is located at 2900 52nd Avenue South. As you can see, 52nd Avenue South runs west to east right here. This is Timber Parkway, the Cashwise grocery store up there. The applicant, Brian Slama, is requesting a minor subdivision for the property described as Lot 2, Block 1, Prairie Farms Commercial Second Edition. The plat will create 2 lots zoned LC Limited Commercial to accommodate future commercial development. The subject property will continue to take access from a private road that runs along the south edge of the property, which then connects to 31st Street South. See, I'll show you on the aerial. So 31st Street South right here, and then up to 52nd Avenue. So the private road runs kind of in an L shape along the property lines. The plat includes an existing access easement that accommodates the private road that runs through lots 1 and 2. Here are some pictures of the site from yesterday. The image on the left is looking southwest from in front of Bell Bank. The grass area here is showing the proposed Lot 2, Block 1, and then this image is from the Burger King parking lot looking northeast, showing part of the proposed Lot 1, Block 1, which is currently under development. Upon reviewing the case, staff found that all review criteria to be satisfied. Written notice of the proposal was sent to property owners within 300 feet of the subject property. To date, staff has received no comments or inquiries. Brian Pattengill is with us this afternoon on behalf of the applicant and may wish to address the commission. Staff is recommending approval, and the suggested motion can be found in the staff report and on the screen. That concludes staff's presentation, and I would be more than happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. Any questions for staff?
Adam, so you have a private road, and that's gonna be the only access to Lot 1, correct?
Correct. That will be the only access to both lots 1 and 2. There is an existing negative access easement on the north side of the property that's carried through from the previous Prairie Farms Commercial First and Second Editions.
But they're not gonna be able to access, they'll be able to access it on that side, correct? That easement? Where Bell
Correct.
Bank is, that you'll be able to drive in there and use that?
Yep, the road that is currently utilized by both Bell Bank and Burger King will
So-
be the same road that's used by both
So
of
what
these
happens
lots.
on the easement, on a private drive when it's the only access point? Is there a public filing? I mean, how do you protect the lot owner from making that road, make sure it's accessible or usable or operating? You know, if it's a wreck, who pays for it and fixes it?
That would be a private property matter, and it would be the responsibility of the property owners that would repair that and fix it. We had the
Right.
same situation at TJ Maxx
Right.
many years ago.
Okay,
Does that satisfy?
sure. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions for staff, or can we call the applicant? Brian, thanks for joining us. You want to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Brian Pattengill with Houston Engineering, representing the owner. Expanding on that access easement, it's very typical for us to, as properties are sold and bought, to have separate agreements between them as far as detailing the maintenance requirements between the various properties, because the city does not get into that access as far as that. So I can't speak for this one off the top of my head, but I believe it's very typical to develop those as far as when the land is sold between different entities, to include a sort of, typically based on the ratio of land area about who owns what percentage of required cost for maintenance and upkeep type of thing long term. Again, this is a simple lot split. The owners are developing the western half of the lot right now, and then they're basically have too much land, so they're splitting off, and they've already got a buyer kind of lined up for the parcel to the east.
Thank you, Brian. Any other questions for the applicant?
I'd like to just ask if there are lots 1 and 2, and there's an agreement between them as to maintenance for potentially the road in front of them. Is that what I'm assuming?
The private access road to the south, or are you
Yeah.
talking 52nd Avenue?
The one that the city would not be maintaining.
I
So-
I don't know off the top of my head of that. I believe the sale details haven't been finalized between the various parties yet.
I see. Well, my concern would be that if it's linked to the property itself rather than the entirety of the road, whether there's enforceability between the two. Say one of them enforces the strip and the other one doesn't.
The easement itself is on the plat, so to vacate that easement or remove that easement would be required to come back before the planning commission because it was created via the plat. So we'd have to actually come back and plat it again, and then to do that, you'd have to get all relevant parties to sign that plat to vacate that private access easement. So it's not like one property can come back and suddenly just take away their access rights. If there was an issue where you had one party denying access to the other party, it becomes a civil matter, and the city's not involved in that.
Yeah, I'm just asking whether there's, in an agreement between the two and the two lots, whether there is a standard that will be established for maintenance of the road.
As far as when it needs maintenance and stuff, I can't say. Typically, like I said, those are sort of a landowner's decision as far as when they deem it's unacceptable. It's not like a city standard where when a street reaches a certain standard of repair that they have to come repaired. Usually the agreements simply state when the road needs repair, it is divided up, the costs are divided up between the lots based on whatever that agreement says at the rates they say. Again, I haven't seen the specific agreements for this parcel. I know they're still sort of in negotiation phases at the state at the current moment with it, but on other ones I've previously worked on, that's been very standard. It's simply a lot area allocation based on the overall lots that are accessing that easement.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank
Mark,
you.
I have a question for Mark. Is this private drive to access these when you have a negative access agreement? Is that common throughout the city? Have we seen any issues with other situations?
Yeah, when people develop along the arterials, you have spacings on that arterial, which sometimes when lots get smaller in size, you need to find some sort of access. And sometimes you can do that with a public road on the other side of the property, or sometimes it has to be done with private access easements. This is an easement that allows the people the right to cross that property to get access to the other property, so it's not landlocked. The Land Development Code will require any vehicle circulation within the zoning district to be an all-weather surface. If there gets to be a maintenance issue, that's a private property dispute that would need to be dealt with civilly. However, I've learned in the past that if you have a prominent business on a prominent arterial, they usually are very concerned about their customers seeking access to their property on a decent road.
Mark, maybe just to follow up, and this is preferable, right, to having a change to the negative access agreement like we did on 45th Street off 32nd Avenue where we gave them an additional driveway. This is preferable that they would use a private drive to eliminating the negative access agreement?
Absolutely preferable, because the Timber Parkway there, if you had full access to 52nd Avenue, the vehicle stacking based on the traffic would be phenomenal, and you would have 10 cars backed up in that parking lot that wouldn't be able to enter into 52nd Avenue versus moving their way over to the light.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, commissioners.
Anybody in the audience wish to speak to this item? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Commission, any further discussion or questions for staff? Seeing none, take a motion.
I move to accept the findings and recommendations of staff as presented.
Thank you. Motion, is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and second. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll take the roll.
Gunkelman,
Aye.
Morgan,
Aye.
Rosenberg,
Aye.
Holtz,
Aye.
Tasa. Aye. Schneider.
Aye. And that is the last item on the agenda, but we did add an item, if everybody recalls, related to the land development code. So don't close up shop yet. Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you, and thanks for accommodating this. It's really just a quick announcement. We wanted to provide an update on the LDC diagnostic and some of the next steps coming forward. So in terms of just a bit of a quick background, most of you will probably recall that earlier this year, the city completed the LDC diagnostic project with the development of a preferred alternative, or basically a recommendation for how to address the issues that were identified as part of the LDC diagnostic report. In summary, the primary recommendation there was to undertake a comprehensive update to the land development code. And as part of the deliverable that the consultant provided was a recommended work plan, which is basically a roadmap to help the city get to ramp up, I guess, to undertake that work. And so one of the items on that work plan, one of the recommendations or sub-recommendations, if you will, was to host or to have some education sessions, specifically relating to some of the newer zoning practices and things that other cities around the country have been using, and that may be part of the discussion when the city is looking at updating the Fargo Land Development Code. Ideally, we'd have a pretty good, solid understanding of how those zoning tools might work, and that's namely primarily referring to form-based code elements. So one of the recommendations was to consider using some form-based code ordinances where appropriate, such as the downtown or the university mixed-use areas, just for a couple of examples. And so recently the City Commission approved a contract extension with LWC. They were the project consultant for the Land Development Code Diagnostic. And so we are tentatively looking at holding some education sessions on Tuesday, November 30th. So we just wanted to get that on your radar, and you'll be seeing some additional correspondence from us in the coming months here. But in the meantime, if you want to kind of save the date on your calendars, that's a Tuesday, November 30th. We'll probably be looking at having a Commission Brown Bag type education session sometime around the noon hour on that date.
Aaron, on that, if we have another, I don't know if how everybody else feels, maybe it's something we could poll people on, but for these meetings, I book off 3 to 5 on my calendar, just assuming, and so I don't have to go back. So hoping it goes about that long. But no, so that's what I book out. And if these meetings are going an hour or less, it'd be great to have some education at the end of them. And that's sort of my opinion. We're already here and committed to it. It'd be nice to tag on to that.
Yeah.
So if that's an option too, I know that's what I'd prefer, but maybe you can ask the other commissioners in some way that if that's something is preferable too. So.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea and something we can kind of take under consideration. I doubt this would be the only education session that we'd be looking to do, and so that's something to keep in mind.
So one other question. We never did then put this out for an RFP?
For the education session?
No, the extension of we never did, okay. The first RFP was to understand whether we should rewrite our LDC.
Yep.
Did we ever open it up then? We just extended the contract with the original?
Yeah, maybe just to clarify that, you're correct. So for the original RFP, we hired, competitive process, we hired Lisa Weiss Consulting to undertake the LDC diagnostic.
Yep.
Which included the diagnostic report was kind of the first deliverable, and the second and kind of final deliverable was the recommendations for how to address those issues identified. And so that was pretty much the extent of their contract. The contract extension was just a small addition to help to organize and to present the education session. And so there's nothing.
So we're still going to, at some point, and whether they get it or whoever gets it, there will be an RFP for the consultant to help with the process of rewriting it.
Correct. Yep. And so these next steps are really the on-ramp to get us to a place where we can write an RFP and get it out on the streets to hire a consultant to actually undertake the rewrite to the land development code.
Okay. I was all of a sudden I thought, geez, did I miss something?
Yeah.
And so they just they tagged on to them. Okay.
Yep, exactly. So we just want to make sure we kind of have a thorough understanding of what the options are out there before we actually write the RFP, just to make sure that we are covering all the bases when it comes to the writing of the RFP.
And just to clarify, so everybody up here understands, this will probably be a 3 to 5 year process?
Yeah, it'll definitely be a multi-year process. So in terms of getting to a place where we're ready to release an RFP for the update, that might take a year or so to get there. Even Mark might have some additional, thoughts on that.
Yeah, maybe I can make this more muddy. How's that sound?
Okay. Work on it.
So we hired LWC consultants to help to look at our land development code. Their finding was a complete rewrite to some degree. And the interesting thing with what they found and what CZB found with Core Neighborhood Plan was our 2007 growth plan is grossly out of date, and that needs to be dealt with. And so the challenge here is our growth plan currently that we have doesn't have land uses identified that have been the kind of national trends of good planning. And you've seen a couple of those cases today that we've struggled with, that mixed use. We don't really have a zoning district that allows for mixed use. And so therefore, we really don't have much of an area for growth plan in the growth plan currently to identify where maybe urban centers should be and what that looks like. If we don't have that created in the growth plan, it's very challenging to come up with a zoning district that accommodates what may be recommended in the future growth plan. And so with this duplicity of CZB and the Core Neighborhood Plan and LWC recommending that we work on a growth plan has kind of put a little bit of halt on that RFP to actually start rewriting the land development code. Now, this next step coming November 30th is going to be some educational sessions on, what do we want that land development code to look like? How do we want these zoning districts to play out? And we will be filming it, and we'll be able to get a copy for you to watch. I really encourage everyone to look at it so we can get some input on sort of what direction we want to go. And that, after that meeting, it's going to help us start putting together the RFP partially of what we want to see in that rewrite of the land development code. Did that help, maybe?
Well, maybe a little clarification for everybody up here would be, we keep throwing around the growth plan, the Go 2030 plan, and then the LDC. So are all three of them, the LDC is sort of the Bible of what we do, but when do we rewrite the growth plan? How does the growth plan and say the Go 2030 tie together? Because the Go 2030 was sort of a growth plan, wasn't it?
The Go 2030 plan technically is our comprehensive plan. And what that does is give us a very broad breadth of what we should be practicing within making decisions at the city of Fargo. They've kind of been done in different periods of the last 20 years. And I would say maybe in the future, the Go 2030 plan is going to be the universal comprehensive plan, and the growth plan is going to be a chapter of that comprehensive plan. The downtown in focus plan is going to be a chapter of that in focus, or that growth plan. The core neighborhood plan is going to be a chapter of that. And then as we proceed in the future with how we want to try doing orderly growth and good development, we would probably work on chapter by chapter updates as they need to be, roughly every 5 years. So we're keeping up with trends.
And are those chapters part of the LDC or part of our comprehensive? Now we're throwing in the comprehensive plan again.
I would say the LDC, the Land Development Code, is the actual boots on the ground ordinances that help implement everything within the Downtown in Focus plan, the Core Neighborhood plan, the Go 2030 plan, and the growth plan.
Could I ask, and thank you so much for that good information, if it's going to take 5 years, how is implementation going to take place with the various entities that are part of the story? So are there portions of what has already, like for instance with the core neighborhood plan or the Goal 30 plan, those things are being implemented now?
That's a good question. I would anticipate going through the RFP process for the rewrite of the land development code and see how some consultants suggest handling that. There's possible options where, for instance, like driveway spacing, some of that can be easily implemented right off the bat, but some of the other zoning districts are going to take some time to be able to find consensus. I think I would rely heavily on the consultant we choose and what the recommendation is and how they feel it could be implemented. And that may be the decision-making factor in the RFP on who we choose to help us go through that process.
I know that we're all anxious to see developments that are going to carry the city forward in a more orderly fashion and consistent. It just seems like 5 years is a long time. But of course, I don't work in your business, and so I know that everything takes a long time. But one of the things I'm concerned about too is the planning for the growth of the city as it's coming up against the diversion. So that's another thing that is not exactly part of this discussion, but I think it's going to be an important part.
Yeah, we understand our 2007 growth plan is quite outdated. And the 1998 Land Development Code, which is what we follow right now, took about 4 years for the redrawing or rewriting of that, just because it gets to be so intricate that we need to make sure we don't create too many nonconformities amongst existing businesses and buildings already. So the growth plan, we're planning on putting together an RFP to start rewriting our growth plan in December, January-ish, hopefully, if all goes well. And based on how that might be looking already is I think we're going to be incorporating storm sewer master planning ideas in there, sanitary sewer master planning ideas, water. We have been working on a return of investment study recently, as well as an incentive study, which are all going to be components that are going to be able to help us construct that growth plan that will help provide orderly growth in those areas that you're talking about right now.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Aaron, you got what you needed from us?
Yeah, I did. And so, like I said, you'll be seeing some more future correspondence from us in that regard, and as well as some of the questions you guys brought up today. I think we'll be able to.
Yeah, if you,
provide some.
I'd ask, I guess, if you'd send out a calendar appointment for November 30th, that's always helpful for me anyways. I'm sure it is for others.
I think with that, Mark touched on it a little bit. I think it'd be very helpful, like when you have an organizational chart, it might be helpful for us up here even to look at how the organizational chart would be on how we make decisions, you make decisions, because, you know, you refer to your criteria met. I think it'd just be helpful to kind of see now, you're just talking now, you may start working on the growth plan or a new growth plan, and maybe, again, who the players in that. I know that coming from the building industry, everybody's getting excited to know, okay, what's our involvement going to be, or what's the involvement going to be? And I think the community would be interested to know. Again, you haven't wrote the RFP for how it's going to get rewritten, and you know, because today we had a good example of, we had what, 4 or 5 things that we've talked about the parking. And again, that comes back to our land development code and how we've known that portion would have to, is one big area that could stand some improvement. So I think we're all excited to get this rolling.
See no other comments, take a motion to adjourn.
So
A motion, is there a second?
Second.
Motion second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye.